Hi there, let's continue the little discussion of what life is actually, life force. And we ended up with, it's interesting enough because it's just thinking today it's May 1st and it's a number sequence 1612, which is interesting in itself, which is of course a 661. So that there is a significance going on there that adds up, gives 13, by the way. But anyways, it doesn't matter. And then at the same time, it's Sunday. And in Christianity, on Sundays, we're always doing this church thing going on. So Sundays are special in the Western world, whereas in the old worlds or the Jewish worlds, then Sunday is the first day of creation. So that's where they begin working. They have their weekend from Friday afternoon and Saturday, which is called Shabbat, where God rested after having, or the Elohim rested after having created the worlds in 6 days. And on the seventh day, they rested. So that's why they have their week in a different way. So we were talking about this whole kind of and many of you will say, ugh, I can't deal with this old religious bullshit, Randy. Could you please just get into where we're supposed to be? And I would say all of you that are saying, I've said that the same way myself, but as you work through your layers of your past lives, you will discover how many times you have been a devout Christian and how many times you've believed in this. So it's part of your energy patterns, whether you will it or not. I'm sorry, guys and girls, but you have to deal with your ancient history and you have to learn your ancient history so that when you go to that level, when you begin to get to the root vortex, which is in the Brahmic understanding is called the root chakra, but in the access point into the biofield is the root vortex, which you should only access after you have cleared your emotional field, because otherwise you will just tap into stuff that will freak the beep, beep, beep out of you, and you will not be ready for the challenges that goes with the oldest level of the molecular state of our being. And that's some of the things I want to figure out a way how to work with the clearing process of the molecular level without necessarily plunging right into the underworld forces. But at some point it will come naturally because it's part of our human history. It goes with the first 3 cycles after the timeline event, and unfortunately is the base code system of our molecular level, unfortunately. But that's also some things that keeps us stuck. That's the original sin. It's not because we stumbled or tumbled because Eve ate of the fruit of knowledge, or fruit the tree of knowledge. Or sorry, I'm not supposed to talk that. You can hear that my brain just clamps down. Like, move on, Randy. Move on. Okay. So we are going back to this whole understanding of surely die, double death. And double death is where you truly lose your life force. As long as you have your life force intact in your energy system, you can be reincarnated over and over again. And I know the Jews do not technically work with reincarnation, but they technically do. There are different lineages, again, within the Jewish understanding of things. And I think this is important because when you study Christianity, you will always meet the scholars that says, no, Jews do not work with reincarnation. And no, they do not work with reincarnation as the world of reincarnation, because the word reincarnation comes from the Hindu mythology, but they are working with the concept of rebirth of certain people within the Jewish lineages. But it's not something that is out there as part of the esoteric teaching system, and it's part of the rabbinic secret teachings, which is called something like the HaKadosh. That's how I translate it, but technically it's the Kadosh HaKadosh, something like that. They have these weird double use of words that means it's sacred. So the sacred as it's called, but that is only for the few that goes within a specific priestly lineage that goes with what we have learned from the Kalantics as the Melchizedek. So again, with this, not to go further that, and some of these priests were also divided into the Chaldeans, and some of them chose to use it as magic and left for the Chaldean realms in of Chaldea, as it said. So these are also some of the original priesthoods that came from Atlantis. So it all ties back to Atlantis and the use or misuse of original types of energy. So the understanding of how far can you push it when you are working with energy before you just go into death or before you go into true death. And that is part of the original respect for life. When we say do not kill, it also means do not use life force in the wrong way. Do not take the life force from others. And then if you say that, for those of you who have ties back to Atlantis, then at least it does it for me. When I say it that way, do not take life force, then something happens in me that opens up something of recalling what really happened in Atlantis. We're always told they used dark magic, but what did they use this dark magic for? What were they after? Life force. This is a place that has become a battle for life force. It's not just energy. Energy is all around. It was energy. All of the cycles are made of energy. So that's not where the battleground is. Code systems are everywhere. That's not where the battleground is either. But the battleground is the true genetics that still can generate life force, and the genetics that have regressed and lost their ability to produce life force. And then you suddenly begin to understand the Trinity in its full composition, where you have consciousness, genetics, you have energies, and then you have the final product, which is the highest level of what we're producing in these universal cycles. That's life force. In the previous cycles, we were in a what we could call a dual system, where we're working with consciousness and energy to create all of the code systems that we are now using as the foundation of true life force. But there are also the code systems that leads to not so true life force. And this is where we distinguish between true light and cold light or false light. So there are code systems that emit light, but they have no life force. So therefore they are false light. We have code systems that emit lights, but holds true life force. And true life force is ruach. That is the essence of the gods that are blown into our nostrils. And if you go with the Arabic language, which is interesting, their word for soul is ruach, which is a Hebrew word that means breath, spirit, what the Yahweh blows into the nostrils of Adam to put him to life. That's ruach. So that, and it can also means the wind. So you have when in the Gospels when Jesus says that the wind blows, or the priest that talks to Jesus in the Gospel of John says the wind blows, or is it he says it to Nicodemus? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. These are for you to study yourself, because that's not that, again, I said, when my brain is just kind of, these are important, and then there's the wrappings, that's not so important. So it's the core essence of what's being said, and the core essence is, it doesn't matter if it was Jesus who said it or the rabbi who said it, because they came from the same culture. But the understanding is the hidden information that ties to the tree of life, that goes with the understanding of ruach and what ruach actually is. And that is, it can be interpreted as the wind blows and wherever it wants to blow. And then it becomes a cloaked way of saying that ruach that goes within the specific lineages within Judaism are given to specific people, which is also talked about when Jesus talked to the Samaritan woman, that not all are entitled to these teachings, and therefore she will only receive the crumbs. So this is also an understanding of the priestly lineages versus the nobility or the kingly lineages, and who has the both, and going back to Jesus, who has both, which he proves both for the councils as well as the rabbis, as well as his students, and that makes him unique, and that's part of his uniqueness. Not that he's half man, half God, because that were completely common at the time, and that was something that they could give. Even in Egypt, we have one of the renowned Egyptian architects that built the pyramid in Saqqara. I can't remember what his name is. It doesn't matter. There's a reason why I can't remember it. But he had the same birth story. He was born from a single mom, did not have a father. And yet he became this famous architect that worked for the Pharaoh. And he was later, worshipped as a half god, half man, because he elevated himself up to work with the Pharaoh, which meant he must have had divine status, because the Pharaoh was half god, half man. So it's completely normal at the time. That was a way of saying they were touched by the gods, that the gods had taken them under their wings, that they had something to them that were more than just the slaves. So therefore they were half god, half man. So you're here seeing how this whole thing that we are in the West saying, oh yeah, Jesus was so special because he was half god, half man. plan. Yeah, that's just kind of a title you get put onto you when you were back there, and if you were special and you achieved something that lifted you out of the ordinary, or you got touched by the celestial realms as the dove that descended from above, right? So you get the touch of the gods. Which either makes you a prophet or a demigod or something else. So you're seeing that in Greek culture as well. So the whole thing, again, going to Jesus, is this, that he was special. He was anointed as both of the kingly lineages, but he was also, that's the washing, you can say. And then he was also anointed in the way that he had the touch of the Shekinah, or he had the divine powers that were bestowed upon him. So again, to put it, so these are just the context to put it that way. But we're going back to the Ruach, which defines that people are special. They're still having viability of the original godly realms, which are the original consciousness units. And it's important for us to understand that as we are misusing our life force, then we will lose it. The more time we reincarnate into physical form, each time our life force, if we're not using the original laws and rules and principles that are put as part of our reality field, from which we should be in alignment with and in true reciprocity, from where we will create harmony between us and the world that we are part of, to create that synergy that does create life force, we will do the opposite triangle, and we will be drawn into the matter worlds and the underworld forces, from where we will not only die, but we will eventually die, because we have misused our original spirit, our original life force, our original breath of life that we were given in these matter forms, but not by the gods, by the original code systems and the true purpose of why we're here. And you will say, that sounds very religious, Randy. No, this is just me using religious thought processes to say that whatever you hear in the church has very little to do with the original teaching systems that has later on been made into the religions we have today, that are only representing 5% of the original teachings. And whatever the priest is saying in the church is something he or she has studied, and by that have not understood the deeper esoteric layers of, and are probably more devoted to some kind of personal projection of what he or she sees their gods to be, that is satisfying their comfort zone and their emotional needs of security, more than actual telling people, yeah, this is how you get the keys back of how to leave this physical form. But as we know in Christianity, Peter gave these keys to the first, or he got these keys as the first patron of Christianity, leaving him as the first Pope, which is the later Latin word of the same understanding, the first father of Christianity. And these keys are now kept by the Vatican on the skeleton city, the necropolis, which is the city of the dead, from where they are having the keys of the heaven and hell, and are the main institution from where all Christians are truly judged, while they are venerating and worshipping their Pope star as the idol of all essence to get into heaven, right? Worship the Pope and you will get the door open, and St. Peter will open the door, because you have worshipped the only left representation of God inside this realm, which is now Pope and the Vatican, which is, just look at it and say, yeah, do you think God is interested in that huge building complex built on the corpses of the workers and everybody who's died and whatever is going on a city of skeletons? Do you think that skeletons, do you think that is worshipping, similar as we're seeing with the churches around our planet that are built upon the corpses of the dead, which is said, yeah, they're resting there, they're waiting for the second coming, and then their bones will be dressed in skin and they will rise up again, because that is what God can do. He can dress people in skin. Yeah, there was a difference there. First and foremost, the whole dressing in skin was from a light body, and it was actually as a punishment. So when you're in your grave and all that's left of you are a couple of bones, do you think that can rise up? Which is in a way that what we are honoring in Halloween. But what can rise up the dead, right? I'm just saying, what can rise up the dead? You know that. I don't have to say it. So that's the other side. So this is again where you have the original understanding of returning to heavens has been made materialistic. And that also goes with why I don't feel it's right to make buildings of the corpses of dead animals, even though it is just matter and it is a building material and it is good for concrete. But it still holds the imprints of the original owner. And I'm not going to live in a house with a lot of imprints, which we could call ghostly energies, connected to it, because everything that we are embedded into our matter, or even though we pull our energy system, everything out, the bones will still hold the imprint of the original owner with whatever that entails. And animals are not animals. They are the remains of humanoids that, or some of them are actually true humans, have lost their ability to create a human form. So therefore they are now in animal form. They have so little life force that they must be born into smaller and smaller vessels until they resume the insectoid level, where there's only one viable genetics left. So that's part of my releasing work as well. Can I release a human? It will take a lifetime to release one single human. So no, I can't. Can I release a horse or a cow or a larger animal? No, similar, because they're still a large physical form. They might not be human, but the size and the weight of it is similar as a human form. It's not more, they're more tied to more matter molecules. So the only thing I can release are birds, small birds, as well as insectoids. And that's all I'm doing because they are on one step from the abyss. So that's where the releaser comes in. But the releasing work can also be the clearing of the distortion energies and how to clear the distortion energies. So in that way, the releasing work is just to take care of the ones that are stuck in the underworld as well as stuck on the lowest level of existence. So that's the poor and the damned, so to speak. So that goes with that one. So that for those of you who are strong in your gospel stories, you will see some things there, because he was not the only one that were able to do that. That's all angelic beings are technically having that capacity. And no, I'm not an angelic beings. I'm just saying the ones from the celestial realms, because it is an understanding of how the structure, the template and the structure and the energy systems are built up. And if you get that true knowledge and work with it, you can do the exact same thing. If you're within the lineage that is supposed to do it, again, it goes within lineages. We have different specializations. So some are to ensure that if things go terribly wrong, they will come to life inside the reality field, and then they will help clean up the mess, quote unquote me. Then you have the ones that are in another end of the spectrum that are in the beginning of the process, and they come in and do something else that is engineering and creating whatever's going on, quote unquote, an older version of me. So this is again where, as things have moved on throughout lifetimes, we are one thing in the beginning of our existence and we become something else at the end of our existence. And each and one of these functionalities has a purpose that is in concordance with our original lineage, to put that in again. So that is also the correct use of our life force. Because if for me, as being part of some of the ones that were part of the engineering and therefore also have the capacity to the deconstruction on the same level, that is the correct use of my life force inside this reality field. So this is why it's important when we are in the end cycles, we need to remember who we are, because it's not just about following the laws and the principles and the rules of engagement, and then you become a good little ritualistic being. It has to be within the context of your lineage and your purpose and function. Because each and one of us have a different functionality which rubs off the rules and the laws and the principles. Not that we are to interpret them as we please. No, this is part of your energy system. The moment you are activating your transformative energy system and you begin to work with life and true energy and true consciousness, and not the matter form and the emotional field and mental field, these are false light energy layers, and you begin to work not with mind and what the processes of the mind, but true consciousness, to really produce what you need to produce, a viability to do the turnaround and get either do the elevation as a path out, or you do the return path and you just turn around and go to the middle domain where you can continue for a while and then get your shit together, or you do the complete evaporation and you just say, yeah, fuck it, I'm so distorted, I can't do anything about anything, so I'll just go that way because that's my destiny now, because that's due to the choices I have made. The only way you can truly get back on track is if you understand who and what you are and understand your original configuration and your original purpose and function. That's the highest level of your template level that you have to work your way back to understand. You can be given it and someone can say, oh yeah, you're your chosen one. But what does that mean? What's the chosen one? Just to use that as an example, as you've seen in all movies, when people are told by some old witch or something, and they are the chosen one, and people just say, yeah, I can't take on that responsibility, whatever. We are all the chosen ones. We all had functionalities here, but we need to discover what that is to truly be in alignment with this reality field. If not, we will create distortion. So it's not just about, yeah, if you don't follow the principles, then you will create distortion, you will transgress, and then you'll come in hell, which is what you see in religion. It is much more complex than that. It's about what's your energy system made of? What's the configuration? What's the original purpose and function inside reality? Who were you when you came here? What did you come here for? Because that's what you engineered to. That's part of your energy system. It's a skill set. These are your talents, which is also mentioned in the Gospels. These are your talents. What's your talent? What did you come here to do? And then people that are highly distorted will say, well, I'm an angelic being, all these kind of things. Well, that's not what you came here to do. Well, I'm a Pleiadian. That's not what you came here to do. What did you come here to do? And then it has to become much, much more special. Were you part of the councils and were to learn politics and how to run a reality field? Or were you one of the science labs that were building holographic features or code systems? And then you go and say, oh, well, Rand, that sounds very much like our society. Yeah, why do you think all these specializations that are so sciencey are beginning to come now? Why do you think that is? We have had centuries of lesser sciencey ways of seeing things. There have been remnants of it, but the Dracos didn't need that to play out here because they had all of that in control with the middle domain races that were controlling everything here, including alien technology and crafts in the sky and what have you, and androids and all these kind of things. They didn't need humans to be a part of that one. But since most of these alien races are now pulling out and what have you, others are coming in, of course, but they're fewer and fewer compared to what there were 10,000 years ago or whatever, but there were fewer people. So anyway, so again, it's difficult because the reason why we're so many people on this planet is because we've got a lot of insectoid races that have come in and they're taking on human form and they are producing in a rate that is also harming our system. So we're having a completely different situation now. So that's also some things we need to deal with in the future. But the whole understanding of those of us who are of the original races that came here a very long time ago, our path out is to rediscover who and what we are. It's not about ritualistic ways of doing things. You will not get out just because you eat correctly. You will not get out just because you go to church. You will not get out just because you're a nice and kind person. These are all good features. Well, you can go to church if you like. I don't have to go to church. But there is some kind of veneration that goes on in churches that is kind of nice, and people who go there have a tendency to try and be a good human. So it's I don't mind. Not today. In the Middle Ages, absolutely, because there you still had the priestly lineages that were connected to the dark priesthood of Atlantis. So therefore, yeah, not so much. They were effectively capable of really putting curses on people. So that was a bunch of shit priests, right? But today, they are just humans like the rest of us. They are emotionally, psychologically engaged in their perception of Christianity, but they are just humans like everybody else. So I don't have any issues today. Today I will go in and listen to a sermon in a church from that priest and say, well, that was a good sermon or a bad sermon. No, my problem for me in the church itself are all the spells that are built into the church that goes back to the Middle Ages. And that is some of the things I'm very sensitive to. And when a person like me goes into these old buildings that are built upon these old types of magics, then things happen there. There's nothing to do with the humans that are presented there, but everything that are part of the older timeline. So that's my problem with churches, not church themselves today, because it's just a building and it's just people that are trying to find their way into something that they can put their faith into that makes them better people, right? And I know I said differently earlier on, but this is the last 5 years and me walking through the valleys of the dead and all of the valleys of the shells and the valleys of everything that is evil and unfaithful and distorted and malicious and what have you on this planet, of course, pushed me into a position of very stark do and do not, because as a protection mechanism to get myself going. And now I'm kind of getting out of that, and we're in a new 5-year cycle where we're working on inclusivity, because this is part of the end cycle dynamics. We had the Orion activation, and then we had a shitload of dark energies coming our way. And in times of severe darkness, to keep your light, you have to be very strong in your conviction, so to speak. You have to stand enormously centered in a specific position so that you will not wobble. But as you go out of that, and we are moving out of that one because of the things that have happened, and they have done what they needed to do here, and there are things in order, new agreements are being made, and new forces of darkness have come up, and it's not Orions they have pulled out, but there are others coming in, so it's not that we're free of it. But they are more in alignment with what we call the fourth cycle, where the Orions were the third cycle, and that was pretty heavy stuff for those of us who had access to the eighth dimension and above. The rest of you just felt worn out and foggy and got this whole physical effects of it, which were part of the last 3 years as the cleaning process, as we similarly had it with the Spanish flu, which were also the aftermath of a highly strong attempt from the Orions in the First World War to try and get in and get their cricket beings inserted into humans and all the things that they are part of. So that's the physical cleaning out process of these incidents, and that's part of how you are to see whatever's been going on the last 3 years was an attempt to try and shut these gates down. So it has succeeded to some degree, but there has been other ramifications of it, which will come in the future, and we will then have to deal with it then. There are always ramifications when you use technology to take out something that is organic, connected to life force. And this is also some of the implications, that there will be a very high price to pay for pushing out darkness. Then there is a loss of life force for those who were used as the barrier to push it out anyways, including for the ones that invited it in, which we also saw as a play out going on different places on our planet. I will not go further into that because that's not where I want to go with this. Just so you understand that whatever's going on has some kind of energetic implication that is the battle of life force. It is the battle of life force that's going on, and that will be so in the future. But as whoever's here are harnessing what they need of the original genetics, as well as the energy configurations, and with that, the ability to produce life force for themselves for a very short time of being, followed by the ramification of getting these original life force genetics inserted into their organic forms or their android forms, which is interesting to see what happens when that unfolds, because I've seen that as well, and that does not end well for them. They will have a high for around 10 seconds. Yeah, and then you can figure out what will happen when you take something that is so strong and holds so much light that their genetics cannot hold it. Then you can figure out what that leads to. But that's also when things come to a justice end, if there is a word that's called that, when things are just. That means that transgression works in many different ways, and the slap of karma has also her own ways to get us to realize and recognize where we're doing things wrong, to put it that way, because karma is, if you ask me, if you want to put a gender on it, it's female. So because justice always goes with the female energy, and that is where energy and consciousness and life force are either aligned to a trinity that will build to new life and new existences, not symbolized in this physical. That's the down in the matter. The female is doing that the same way. She's doing that, giving birth, right? And she has to have that injection from the male to be able to do so. But in the original female understanding of female consciousness, then the balance and the order and the harmony that comes from features that are within the female consciousness itself. It's the trait of the female consciousness, which is what the true humans prefer. And even their males are also embedded deeply into the laws of the universal structures and how to work with that. But they work in a different way that is also order and balance, but they are not necessarily working towards harmony, which can be a little bit stagnant. They are working towards what the humanoids took to heart, and that is transformation. That is how to transform energy and change it into something else, which, if you really begin to look energetically into the males on our planet, will get a deeper understanding of. So when we talk about what is the true version of a male today and what's the true function and purpose of a female today, then we have to look into the consciousness potentials that goes with the males and the female. And the original form of this has very little to do with the physical form, which we are seeing in many of the cross-gender and different forms of gender that we are now seeing in human form. Even though the human form is still either with penises or vaginas, then we are seeing that what is inside these either penis-driven or vagina-driven matter forms are holding a different types of personality structure that alludes to the many different ways of how we can perceive ourselves as individuals, not determined by our sex or our physical form, but determined by our potentials and our functionality. And with that, the whole nomenclature of being either male or female loses its power, because in the original worlds of whatever and whoever we were not defined by gender or by a specific male or female. We were defined by our purpose and our function, and what we contributed with to the original reality field that we were part of. So in essence, what makes a worthy human, that is what we generate, the amount of life force and the amount of progression and the amount of change that will benefit the highest good of the many. That is what we are supposed to be defined by, and not defined by how we look and what we have earned of money and how much power we got inside of this world. These are all the distorted versions of the original functionality of who and what we're supposed to be in the progressive realms. So with that one, I want to end this video, and then I will sum up in the last video where, again, building a trinity structure. And I know I promised that I would go into the 4, 5, and 6 bullet points of the 12 choices of the living, of life. And of living, it kind of goes all 3 of them matches, because 12 choices of living means this is how you're supposed to live as a living being, but it also the choices of life if you want to create life force, but it is also the choice of the living as in kind of those of us who are still alive, right? So it kind of fits the play with words, but it's important. Words have energetic, they are an energetic representative of features and dynamics that are part of our existence, to turn back to what we truly were and really understand the background of the commandments, as well as understanding what is the foundational understanding of world religions and why we technically can't use the world religions anymore, but we have to let them go and then get back to the original features of what it means to be human or humanoid inside this reality, to work for the unification of our races, and to work for the synergy of the 12 universal lineages, and to work in concordance with the original energy and understanding of our reality field and what it was originally supposed to do, as well as work with our own individual purposes and functions that goes with our core consciousness that are embedded into our template in some form or version, whether it is just for this system, which is fine because you will still be in alignment with who and what you are, or what you were beyond this system, which is also fine because that will also show you the subconscious function and purpose, not subconscious, but the sub-level purpose and function that you took onto yourself when you entered into this system. And this is what we're looking for. Once we get in alignment with that, then we will no longer create distortion. Then we can begin to clear out what we are. But you have to clear out first to get to that point. So it's a catch-22. You have to do it in blindfolded, in darkness. You have to stumble upon everything that is in you before you can get beyond that. and begin to get to the true level where you can generate life force. And that's what we're talking about here. When we talk about the work within the 3 lower fields, then the purpose is something else, and the function of these is something else. And that's some of the things I work with in the whole transition science classes, and some of the things I'm going to work with on the randygreen.one website, where I will create classes for that level. But here I'm giving the highest level in the context of religion, in the context of what was, in the context of history, and in the context of our own galactic history, so that you kind of get that whole purpose of things, and you can use it or not. But again, it's a matter of, we have to get through the 3 layers of what we are, the highest level, the energetic level, and the physical level, and understand the functionality in each one of them. That's part of the tree of life and the Kabbalistic tree, and that's part of the chakra system. It's part of whatever the chakra system is divided as well into these different layers, even though it's just saying 7 chakras is actually more than that, because there's some up and then they become more as they unfold and unravel. But when you look at it from below, it's only 7. And onward and so forth. So this is the deeper understanding of the outer, the middle, and the inner. And that is our working area when we are activating and awakening and begin to understand the paths of who and what we have become, and how we either return and get back on them, or choose to accept our destiny and then go the root way into the abyss and cease to exist and dustify. Thank you.